Directors Institute. I want to welcome you to the second session of what would have been a session at Savannah had COVID-19 not interrupted all of our lives. For those of you who were on Monday, we had a great discussion on marketing and the importance of doing that. And today, we're going to be talking about the importance of communications and relations with your board of directors and local governments. This has been a 50-plus year challenge for all of us as regional council executive directors. And I think from all the assessments and works that SERDI has done over the years, and I'm sure that you have done in your roles, that the better the communication, the more relevant your organization, and the better you sleep at night. Today, we're going to take a look at this subject from the perspective of four regional council directors, and we're very appreciative of them taking the time to talk to you about various aspects. One thing I do want to say before we get going is I want to thank Martha Schickel and Plan RVA in Richmond for setting up all these Zoom sessions for us, and Martha kind of running the machines for us. We're going to start with Sabrina Graham. Sabrina's the executive director of the Low Country Council in Yemassee, South Carolina. She's had a number of years of public administration experience and was a county manager before she became the executive director at Low Country a number of years ago. And Sabrina's going to talk about successful and worthwhile board of directors meetings and other communications that you should be thinking about as executive directors. So Sabrina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. If I can share my screen here just a moment. I'm going to find it just a minute. Okay, can you all see my screen? Thank you, Martha. Want to do this, and I won't take very much time because there are other speakers to come behind me, but I wanted to share some initial general information, I'll call it, and then get into what I consider some low country tips that I use that I think makes for a successful and worthwhile board meeting. The basics, I think we all know. Our board wants to know what's happening within our organization to make sure that things are operating the way they should be, and that we are not having any financial challenges. The agenda, that first bullet says, forms the basis for getting valuable information, addressing important matters, and making decisions. If I have an agenda that does not do at least one of those things, then I don't have a meeting. If I don't have valuable information to share, if I don't need a board action, then I don't have a board meeting because I think I'm wasting their time. So I'm always having them to come because I need a decision or I'm sharing some information with them. The second item, I want to make sure that my meetings are chaired effectively. I'm not sure how you all select your board chairs. Mine rotate. Sometimes I have great chairs who can handle meetings very well, and sometimes I do not. So it's really important that I prepare them as much as possible, making sure that I have the agenda, that we follow the procedures, that we have supporting documentation for those meetings, that we get our agendas out in advance so that chair has an opportunity to prepare him or herself for that meeting, and try to anticipate what might be issues or challenges that they may face so that I can help them be as prepared as possible. And again, that helps for our board meetings to go very smoothly. My low country tips, things that I share that I think help us a whole lot. Initially, we prepare at the beginning of the year, we being myself and the other department directors, we prepare a calendar of agenda items so that we know in advance kind of what to expect at each meeting. We have a monthly meeting each month with the exceptions of November and December. And typically we will cancel 2 other meetings if we don't have activity. And I want to show you what that calendar looks like. If I can pull that up for you just a second. Here's our, and it's the very rough one that we're doing this year. We just simply list what do we know that we're going to have come up on the agenda each month. If I know we've got to update a contract, if we've got to put bids out, if we know we have 5310 transportation items, everything that we know will take place during the year, we put it on the calendar. That helps me to know when I've got very heavy agendas or very light agendas. That lets me know if I can invite a speaker. If we've got a light agenda, we can invite speakers. If it's very heavy, we can shift some things around. But this calendar is kind of the place that we start each year to identify what's going to happen at a particular meeting. And again, it's very helpful to us to plan and anticipate those things. I don't like the, we forgot, we've got to have a public hearing kind of stuff. So if we can plan ahead and put it on this calendar, then we can anticipate those things. We can move things around and that sort of thing. So this calendar is very helpful to us in that process. The board member fellowship, the food, I've heard this at other meetings and thought, you got to feed them, but it really is important. It's an opportunity for them to kind of talk to each other and see how things are going in their various local governments. And we serve our meal before the meeting, 30 minutes before the meeting. We will have an actual meal for the board members. If members are running a little late, that means they're not late for the meeting. They may be late for the meal, and that typically doesn't happen. They really do like to come in fellowship. So ours is 30 minutes before meeting, and we provide a full meal for them. For the agenda items that require board action, I always prepare a cover memo for them that summarizes what that item is about, so that they don't have to dig through or try to figure out what we're going to be trying to cover. And also along with that memo, I include a recommendation. If you want them to take a particular action, then why not recommend it? So I recommend it in my cover memo. And if it's something that I don't need to take a position on, I will give them the options and let them decide. But I always provide a cover memo along with the supporting documentation that they might need to take action. My director's report, it gives highlights of any recent or upcoming COG activities or activities in the region so that they can stay informed as to what's happening. I don't have every director give a presentation at every meeting. I simply do that as a part of my highlights, again, of any recent or upcoming activities. Routine updates on various COG programs as the board members change. There's been times when they don't really fully understand all of the programs and what we're doing at the COG. So each year, at least once a year, each department director will give an update. It may be on a particular project. The Community and Economic Development Department may talk about a grant that they've been awarded for a particular local government, and they will do before and after photos, talk about the project and kind of explain this is some of the work that we do. So each year, we keep the board updated by those presentations from the various department directors as to what they're doing. Item 6 says no surprises. They should hear it from me. I don't like to be surprised, and I don't want my board to be surprised. If there is something that's coming in the community that I think it's important that they should know, I try and make it my business to tell them. If there's something that we've screwed up on here at the COG, I make it my business to tell them in advance so that they're not surprised. They don't hear it in the street. They don't come to a board meeting and they've got to make a tough decision and they're hearing it for the first time. So I like to make sure that they stay informed and they're not surprised, especially if it's bad news. The follow-ups, if there is something that I'm asked at a board meeting, for me, I don't know is still an answer. I don't make up answers. If I've got a director there that can assist, I will look to them to answer, or I'll simply say, sir, ma'am, I'm not sure, I don't know, but I will follow up. And I do that. I follow up as soon as possible to make sure that they get the answer that they need or that they're looking for. That's really important that you do the follow-up. Item 8, information sharing with my fellow COG directors in South Carolina. We share our agendas. If we're introducing new programs in our areas, if we're having certain speakers to come and talk to our boards, we meet monthly and talk regularly, but we share that information with each other so that if there's a great idea that Ron Mitchum is doing in Charleston that I think will work in Low Country, we share those ideas and we may implement those things. So that's been very helpful, especially when we're looking for things to put on the agenda, speakers to have. We can share that information and that becomes very helpful to us. Item 9, and I put that in red, developing good working relationships with your board members. That is very, very important. You shouldn't be sitting in the room with strangers. You should know your board members, spend a little time with them. I learned this at one of the other SERDI meetings, having the one-on-one orientations. I used to do a group orientation and someone else talked about one-on-ones, and that's been very helpful to me to spend some time getting to know them a little bit more about them personally. So I do one-on-one orientations. I call them from time to time just to check in, see how things are going. If they've got issues that I know about, whether it's personal or if it's something in their local governments, I'll just check in to see if there's anything I can do, if there's information I can share to help them with decisions they may be making, then I try to provide that information. But build that relationship with your board members. They will appreciate it. They will forewarn you. They will give you a heads up of things that are coming that may impact your COG if you have that kind of relationship with them. So I can't say enough about building the working relationship with your board members. It makes all the difference for them and for you. Other communications, again, the one-on-ones with the orientations, a follow-up, I mentioned that again. I attend council meetings for my board members. I don't attend them all, but I do attend on a regular basis activities in the community. Again, I do not attend them all, but I think it's important that you remain visible, that you see your board members and that they see you in other places. Many times we have good conversations at those other events. So I think it's important that you stay visible within your region and in your community. Newsletters, we do an annual or monthly newsletter, weekly, monthly activity reports. I don't do that as much as probably some others, but as information or things happen, I do share that information. I want to keep them informed, but I don't want to kind of overwhelm them with too much information. Everybody that I know, every local government has a newsletter. And so I don't want to duplicate things that I know they're getting other places. I may email them something that comes up that I think they need to know before the next meeting or the next newsletter. And again, make phone calls to them and have conversations with them just as I think needed, or just to touch base. Certainly, if I haven't seen someone at a meeting or a couple of meetings, I may just reach out and make a phone call and see how they're doing, or if there's something that I can be of assistance with, but just to kind of share that. And those are my tips and points that I use that are very helpful. My meetings normally last, if we do an hour, we've had a long meeting. We do the 30-minute meal before that. I don't walk into a meeting very often that I don't know how decisions are going to come out, because I've had the communications up front. So I do encourage that if you've got some things, that you have those conversations and it works smoothly. And that's my story.
Thank you, Sabrina, very much. And we'll get back after we have all the presentations with some time for questions. The second speaker today is Lori Corley. She's the director of the East Alabama RP in DC in Anniston. And she's going to talk to y'all about ongoing communications and engagement with your local government elected officials. Lori?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me today. I see a lot of friends that I'm missing. So thank you so much. I'm going to try to share my screen as well, Martha, if I may. And
you have a green share screen button at the bottom. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. So since we're in the Southeast, I went all the way across the nation to find the document that I have tried to follow throughout my career in working with boards. Just a little bit about me. I come from the nonprofit sector for the most part. And what I've learned is that dealing with a board of elected officials is very different than dealing with a board that you pick and choose. And because in the nonprofit world, we recruit specific people to come on the board for their expertise, whether that be in accounting or in the public relations. And so it's been a challenge for me to move to this. But one of the great things that I experienced earlier in my career was that I was actually a communications director for a local official. And so I learned a lot about how I like to be communicated with and on behalf of that elected official. And so I think that that gives me kind of a unique perspective of how you can work with people who are on your board of directors. And my phone's ringing, so excuse me while I mute that. Sorry about that. So this is the Institute of Local Government in California, and this is a document that I've enjoyed using throughout the years to just kind of start building relationships with my local governments. And the first thing here that you'll see is that to establish the communication priorities at the beginning of the relationship. And as soon as we get a new board member who is coming on, who's been elected, here at my commission, we're very different in that every local municipality and county has a seat on our board. So that makes us very, very large. That's a lot of people to get around and see. But that's what we do first thing when they're elected and they're put into office. We go and meet with them first thing. A couple of tips that I like to touch on while we're doing that first meeting is, first of all, I like to find out how they like to be communicated with. Do they prefer email? Do they prefer a letter? Do they prefer you contact their assistant or another staff member to work with them, to work with you? But that is I think the most important thing to start is to find out how they like to be communicated with. Second, I like to just find something, a touch point that's common ground for us, whether that be a friend, a family member, something that they're really interested in their community. It may be their local football team or my football team or some priority that we have in that relationship. Is very important because that's when you know you're communicating with them personally, but also on a business level. I also like to find out what I call is their hot trigger. What point on them can I touch that's going to move them to action? And what is the trigger that will get them involved in our organization? And that could be that we have, they're very interested in water systems, or they're very interested in senior services. What is that hot trigger that gets them to move to action? And I say this because when I worked in Nashville for a community at-large councilman, we got about 400 emails a day that we searched through and hit on. And a lot of those were about stormwater. And we found, and many people found, that we were, my local official was a person who was very interested in that because he had been a former fire chief and had run emergency management for the city. And so they reached out to us, and groups found that we could be triggered to action through that. Unfortunately, a very unfortunate thing happened when Nashville flooded in 2010, is that one of the men who had been working so hard to move us to action in that stormwater problem, and would call our office almost every day. We didn't move fast enough for him. And unfortunately, he succumbed to that flood in a stormwater problem. So just finding out what those things are that can move people to action is very important. I also like to find out what is the person's deal breaker. What will make them say, I'm not participating in this? What are those things that really turn them off? What breaks the deal for them? So that's really important, I think, as well. I think that Sabrina touched a lot on also how she keeps her staff, her board updated. We do much the same through our website, our email, but we also do a lot of Facebook posts. We go out and comment on a lot of cities and different mayors or county commissioners' posts of just trying to continue to engage them. If they're doing something great in their community, we want to be on board with that. And if there's a problem that comes up, we want to be a resource to them to be able to help. So that's very important for us as well. One of the things that we're looking to start is doing more workshops. What are the goals that the board wants to set for, and the elected officials want to set for us to do, for me to pursue as their executive director, because they set the tone and we implement it. They set what the agenda is and we implement it. Now, many times I feel like that's just the opposite, because I'm advising them on the things that we are doing. But a true good board executive director relationship will have the board driving a lot of the strategic planning for the organization. Our board chair is elected from the nominating committee of our board. So that is something that passes through a number of people from time to time. But the role of our chair in our board is pretty much to run our board meetings and handle any issues. And I think this is very important under the role of chair among the electeds that may arise, so that staff is not in the middle of that. I don't want in my position to be trying to whip a lot of votes for things. I want my chair to be able to communicate with the other electeds to get that done for us. Many times I will talk with my chair about things that need to be done and ask him or her to survey the board to see how they're feeling about a certain issue that we may be dealing with. I think a little bit earlier I talked about tailored communications methodologies, and knowing that every board member and every elected is different and how they like to be communicated with. Also, I like to find out, when is the time that I need to call you on your cell phone? When is the time that I need to page you? I don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of information, but I do want to know when the time comes that they want me to send them the 911. And fortunately, that's only happened once here, but for me in 2 years, but that's something that I like to know as well in communicating with them. Regular in-person meetings. This has been hard over the last few months. We just had our board meeting yesterday for the first time in person since February. It was a great meeting. People were really happy to see each other. We had social distancing. We had boxed lunches. So there wasn't a lot of interaction, aside from being across the table. But I will say that it's so much easier for me. I can't read. A lot of my board members do not like to do Zoom. They'd rather just be on a phone call. And if you study communications at all, the body language of a person tells me more than sometimes what comes out of their mouth. So I really like to be able to see people and talk with them. But also, I think it gives people the opportunity to see from each other what's important without just talking about it. But they can read each other too. And so we have our board meeting every other month. In person, and we do serve a meal at those board meetings. Our board meetings are rather formal, which I'm trying to move a little away from, but they are quite formal, with someone at a podium and passing off what committee is speaking. So you just have to find kind of what your groove is for, I guess, really who your board is made up of at that time. We don't do weekly updates. This is something that is recommended here, but we just do an update when we feel like that there's something really important that we need to share. And then we update our Facebook and share those things as well when we have, publicized things that we want to share. We certainly do voice to voice for sensitive matters, and this is extremely important. I am an emailer. I like to communicate that way, but I know that a lot of people don't. And so that's something that I have to work on myself as a way to communicate those sensitive things through voice to voice. We do a newly elected officials orientation as well, and that is very helpful to us. This takes newly elected mayors or county commissioners through the role of our commission, how we were formed, what we're capable of doing, what we're not really into doing. And I think that takes on from time to time the flavor of who your board is made up of and who your staff is as well, even though you have those core missions that you are and the vision of your organization. An organization will take on the flavor of their leadership. And so I think that's an important thing to realize, and also to gauge from the newly elected officials what they're interested in and where you can find those hot triggers for them to move to action. Our staff reports at every board meeting, our program leadership is just a very short 5-minute presentation that they do that just tells any of the high points that they need to share. And let me see. I'd be happy to send this document out, and I give full props to this Institute of Local Government in California that I've followed this communication and that I've followed for years in building strong boards. We're not quite there yet in this organization, but we're working on it. And recruiting with such a large board, we have to go out and recruit some people who are going to be, our ride or die. They're going to be there with us every time and help us out when we need them to do that. So I hope this has given you a little bit of good information about how we operate. And I will get this document out to you, Jim, so that you can share it for the group.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. It tied into this document that Laura's going to send, and we'll get it out, and we'll also put it on the website. You probably already noticed that we're recording this, and we'll have all 4 of the sessions up on the website soon for you to refer back to, or for you to encourage your colleagues to take a look at. The next speaker is Chris Rito. He's at Appalachia Regional Planning Council in Tallahassee, Florida. One of the big challenges that all regional council directors face from time to time is dealing with your legislature. I know that in the past, there are states that actually have members of their House and members of their Senate on their board, which, if it's possible to do that, it's always been, great. I know years ago in Kentucky, and I don't know if it's still the case, each ad district had a member of the House and member of the Senate. And so you automatically had 30 members of the legislature that actually knew who you were and didn't have to stop and explain to them again who you were. So anyway, it's a challenge, and Florida from time to time has faced some challenges with their legislature. And so we thought it'd be great for Chris to kind of give the Florida perspective. And I'm sure that it translates across the other 11 states as well. So Chris.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, I can't seem to get the slideshow to start in full screen mode, but I'll just, if you can see the slides, then I'll just go ahead and get started. So as Jim said, I know a lot of you already, but for those who don't know me, my name is Chris Rito. I'm the director of the Appalachia Regional Planning Council here in Florida. My region's in the kind of the central panhandle part of Florida. We're mostly rural. Our offices are actually located in the capital, but our surrounding 8 counties it's a mostly rural region. I've been here for over 20 years now, and believe it or not, for me, starting late next month, I'm entering my 8th year as director. It's flown by. A lot of changes since I've been here. So just a little bit of background on, as Jim alluded to, the Florida Regional Planning Councils. We have a statutory requirement that counties are members of regional planning councils. And we were given that back in the 80s, along with growth management responsibilities. And that's why we have planning in our name. That was, it actually kind of hurt us as we kind of reflect on the changes that have happened over the past 10 years. But because of those responsibilities and because of that money that came with those responsibilities, we always had a target on our back with the legislature. So we no longer do growth management as required by statute, and we no longer receive those funds. So we no longer have that target on our back. It allowed us to really take a look at ourselves in the mirror and figure out who are our members. We had this allegiance to the state because they were providing us a significant amount of funding for growth management. But we were formed before we were written in a statute to serve our member local governments. So over the past 10 years, we've really refocused our efforts, and we have become more of organizations that provide technical assistance in a number of program areas for our region. And we tailor our needs, or our services, to the needs of our region. We act more kind of in a fee for service. I will say we do still receive a lot of contracts from the state because we're in a good position to implement programs at the regional level. There's 10 regional planning councils. The state just, they don't have the capacity, and we're able to implement a lot of their programs in a more cost-effective manner, and that's important moving forward. So I kind of mentioned a little bit our historical relationship to the legislature. I would say, based on my experience, they've never loved us, probably never will, but we've been able to strike a balance as far as a relationship that keeps them informed on what they do and keeps that target off our back. A big part of that is obviously because we no longer receive funding from them, but we've come a long way in trying to promote ourselves and tell our story in what we are. I think part of the problems that we've had in the past was this misunderstanding that we were this regulatory agency because of our growth management role. But over the past 10 years, there's been turnover, obviously, in the legislature. Those responsibilities have disappeared, and we have refocused our efforts in resiliency initiatives and economic development. And I think our reputation has turned, and folks are starting to recognize us more as a resource, a regional resource, as opposed to some extra layer of government. We have the Florida Regional Council Association is our association for our 10 regional planning councils in Florida, and we all chip in so that we can hire a lobbyist or a legislative consultant and a statewide coordinator that provides kind of the administration role for setting our meetings and our agendas and helping with outreach. That's been very helpful. Obviously, having funding for a lobbyist is very advantageous, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So Jim mentioned, our experiences with the legislature. We have one recent lesson learned that many of you probably have heard this story already, but for those that haven't, there actually used to be 11 regional planning councils in Florida. And in 2015, there was actually legislation that was put forward to eliminate all of us. We had gotten to a point where they didn't feel our relevancy was probably at a low point. We were in our 4th year of the governor vetoing funding for us that the legislature approved. They were getting kind of tired of allocating money for us only to see it vetoed and go back into general revenue. But more importantly, we had a director that wasn't a team player, and at that time was kind of a problem child for us and had been for some time. And we were unable to kind of rein him in and make him a part of the team and have him integrate with us. And during one of his board meetings, one of his more conservative board members and a big supporter of the current governor at that time, well, he was in the room. Another board member asked that director if he thought that we were going to receive an appropriation this year, and it was an election year. And that director at the time, instead of remaining politically neutral, said, well, if the right governor is elected, we'll get our funding. That was enough for that other board member to overhear that conversation, who then went to their local senator and said, we've got to, I don't know what these RPCs are good for, but our director here is advocating, for your political opponent. And if he's doing it, I bet the other 10 RPC directors are doing it too. So that resulted in this legislation being filed to eliminate all 11 regional planning councils. Fortunately, we had our lobbyist, our legislative consultant, and our association came together to kind of figure out a strategy on how to handle this. And after meeting with that senator, he explained to us that it wasn't his intent to eliminate all of us. It was certainly to get our attention. And we were able to work with him, kind of change some of our statutory responsibilities, eliminate some old ones, get rid of things that didn't apply anymore, and take care of a planning council that had really kind of lost its way. So that eventually resulted in the elimination of the Withlacoochee Planning Council, and those counties were absorbed by the surrounding regions. So it was a lesson learned for us, one that most were already aware of, but you really have to have a good relationship with your legislature, because they can eliminate you if they want to. At least in Florida, they can. So just kind of talking about some strategies for improved legislative relations. In my experience, this ultimately falls on, it's the role of the executive director to kind of make this a task that you take seriously. And you have a number of different ways that you can do this. One of the most successful ways that I've seen is you taking advantage of your board members by preparing them as advocates. They're out there, they have relationships with a lot of these legislators. They have interactions. And if you have a great relationship with your board and your council is in a good spot and is doing good things, it doesn't hurt if you kind of let your board members know to throw in a good word for you. But that's if your council is in a good position. Sometimes, in the situation that I inherited, our council hadn't been relevant for quite some time. So that was kind of a heavy lift to get board members to become advocates. In that case, what you can do is you can give them a cheat sheet for you, and that kind of goes over some of the accomplishments and the things that you're proud of, or the things that your council's taking on, so that they can at least talk about some of the positive aspects of your organization. One of the other things I'll openly admit that I have not done, but it's still on my long-term to-do list, is set up annual meetings with legislators. And obviously you don't want to do that during session, they're too busy, but you can set up times during off session just to go in, sit down with them, introduce yourself, and give them 30 minutes of your time, give them a 30-minute overview of your organization and what they're doing, and thank them for their service. And in the times that I have done that, they're kind of surprised that there isn't an ask. Well, what do you need? So, well, we just want your support, and just want you to know that we're doing good work in the region. And that actually, I've gotten a couple smiles on, oh, that's it? Okay, not a problem. But the key is making the effort and the time to do it. And with everything else that's on our plate, it is a challenge. And I have not done it yet. I'm getting there. So I would certainly encourage it. I mentioned our lobbyist, our legislative consultant. In Florida, we've learned over the past 10 years how to play defense. We knew after I believe the fifth year our allocation was vetoed, our appropriation was vetoed, that it was time not to ask anymore. We weren't making any friends in the legislature when we were constantly asking them for money, and the governor just vetoes it. So we had to kind of change our strategy and realize and take the advice of our lobbyists that right now, with the political environment in Florida's legislature, the best thing that you can do is play defense. And so that's what we did, and a lot more outreach. And just finally, this past session, we received funding for the first time in, gosh, it's been 10 years, 11 years. And it was not for just being a regional planning council and just give us money to go continue to do the good work that we're doing, but it was for a specific project. And we historically have updated our regional evacuation studies for hurricanes in Florida. And finally, we convinced the legislature of all years to give us $1.2 million to update those studies that haven't been updated in over 10 years. So I think the lesson learned there is know when to ask and know when to play defense. So some of the other presenters kind of talked about board meetings. We, at least at our council, our board meetings have morphed into more less formal, more regional discussion. We end the meetings with lunch for networking, and we try to use as the opportunity to kind of talk about the good things that we're working on, and then we try to give as much opportunity for them to talk about regional issues, and so they can learn about what's happening in other parts of the region, and it's a networking opportunity for them. And from those discussions, we get direction in areas where we need to help. So our board member meetings have grown to the point where I've got more guests than I do board members. Our partners come because they want to hear about what's happening. This is a source of information for them that they just normally don't have access to. So we, as part of our invite list, we invite all of our legislative delegation, at least the staff. So, and a lot of times they're coming. So then we also give them at the end of the meeting an opportunity, we recognize them, and we also give them an opportunity to provide an update. We haven't been successful at this, but we have always invited our legislators to be a speaker at our board meetings, be a presenter, especially some of the legislators that have a good chunk of your region. I've met with them with my chair to kind of during the times that I have met with a legislator and said, come talk at our board meeting, come present. And you've got most of your region is in the room, most of your elected officials that represent this region. So unfortunately, we haven't had folks take us up on that, but we're still pushing it. Outreach is big. That was mentioned previously. I think trying to keep them updated on what you're doing, adding them to your newsletter email lists, copying them on press releases that go out, inviting them to come to your association meetings or other events or workshops that you're having in the region. We certainly have seen a lot more involvement and have been, and then it's been reciprocated where they're inviting us to a lot of the events that they're doing. And that's, I think, a part of just making an effort to outreach to them, to let them know that they're part of the team. Another opportunity that's out there that many of you have already taken advantage of is going to visit your members of Congress through the NATO Washington conference. I've done it one time. They do a great job of setting up the meetings for you, and you can go down and a lot of times meet your congressman or congresswoman and have an opportunity to talk about your organization and thank them for their service, and that goes a long way. And then the last part I'll say is just, as this is happening, you'll start to get more invites and more opportunities to sit at the table and provide input. I had no interaction with our legislative partners when I started 7 years ago. We were always fighting to kind of get to the table, and now it's just the opposite. I'm getting calls from legislative aides asking for my advice or opinion on a certain topic, which for me it was a big turnaround for our organization, because it makes me feel like they're actually we're relevant and our opinion counts. So when you do get that opportunity, even it may conflict with another meeting or something else that you have on your plate, be sure to reciprocate that and provide input and participate, because it does go a long way. And that's, I think, all I have on mine, Jim. And then we'll save questions for the end.
Thank you very much, Chris. Some really good stuff. He kind of presented a segue for Terry. Terry Bukowski is the executive director of the East Tennessee Development District in Alcoa that serves the Knoxville and East Tennessee area. And one of the reasons that we started talking about putting together this session was because of Terry's comments one night about nonpartisanship and how important that is. And Chris pointed out about Withlacoochee and its final demise, which had probably a lot to do with what Chris said. And so we're going to call on Terry now to talk about the absolute must of being nonpartisan in your positions and for your council. Terry.
So thank you, Jim, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm hopeful that SERDI can get back together. I guess in Annapolis would be the next opportunity.
Right.
Missed everybody in Savannah, and certainly again in Cleveland. I announced my retirement just recently, so this might be the last input I will have with SERDI, but I certainly have enjoyed my association with the organization and made a lot of friends, and certainly those are friendships that I hope to maintain into the future. So my topic today, as Jim mentioned, is the importance of remaining nonpartisan when serving as an executive director of a regional development organization. My personal opinion as a director is that I serve whomever has been elected without regard to political affiliation. I have great respect and admiration for those that serve as office holders. I know that's a job that I could not do, because quite frankly, I don't have the patience to succeed for a very long period of time. But I serve a big district. I've got 16 counties, 56 cities, a population of about 1.5 million people. And I can tell you very truthfully that I hate elections. It's a very, very difficult time because I know that I'll be losing some friends in office, and I'll also have to spend a lot of time training officials, getting them familiar with our organization, developing relationships that are going to last for an extended period of time. But I'm not without my own sense of politics. I vote in every election. Times I even contribute minor amounts to political candidates. However, I have never publicly advocated for and against a candidate or office holder, and have never worked on behalf of a political candidate in a campaign. So my discussion kind of centers on a particular experience that is still impacting all 9 Tennessee development districts today. So back in 2018, we had a gubernatorial campaign here in Tennessee. The serving governor at that time was term limited, so he couldn't run again, and that made the election process very competitive. Tennessee, of course, is known as a red state, and for the most part, you know, that's the way we vote. But an important caveat is that our major metropolitan areas, Knoxville, Nashville, Chattanooga, and Memphis, are all Democratic strongholds. So given the fact that about 65% of our population lives in urban areas, it was clear that the gubernatorial race was going to be very, very close. On the Republican side, we had a guy by the name of Bill Lee, a surprise primary winner that didn't get an overwhelming percentage of the primary vote, just 37%. But he did get more than anybody else in a very crowded field of primary candidates. On the Democratic side, we had Carl Dean, a former mayor of Nashville, a very well-known and respected politician in Middle Tennessee, the most populous area of the state. And the general opinion of the pundits was that if Carl Dean could make inroads into the rural areas, he could win the election. About 6 months before the election date, at a statewide meeting of development districts, we were informed by one of our executive director colleagues that he was taking a leave of absence in order to work as the rural coordinator in the Carl Dean campaign. This person was going to be the strategy resource person on the Dean campaign for all things rural. And he had somehow convinced his board to grant him a leave of absence so that he could help the Dean campaign and then return to the development district once the election was over. Whether or not he would have returned if Mayor Dean had won the election is open for speculation, but the bottom line is Dean lost and the director returned to his old job shortly after the election was over. When the director informed the Development District Association of his intent to work in a campaign, we were somewhat surprised, but this guy was a former county mayor and had always been active in local politics in the past. So I thought there might be some ramifications in his district as a result of this if Bill Lee won, but I had no idea of what was about to happen to us all. So we started seeing some pushback on this on social media almost immediately after our colleague joined the campaign, a Republican state representative from West Tennessee, and Tennessee is divided up into 3 sections, West, Middle, and East, long state. This guy was known as somewhat of a maverick, a bit of a loose cannon, and he posted something on Facebook to the effect that he always knew that development districts were controlled by Democrats, and this proved it. So our group got wind of this, and we sent an emissary to him to try and convince him that we are, for the most part, nonpartisan. But this really did not go well. But again, I wasn't too worried because this guy was in West Tennessee, 300 miles from me, didn't really have any leadership standing in our General Assembly, and was known to vent on social media on a variety of issues. Unfortunately, this was a serious mistake on my part and indeed our entire group of directors. Of course, the Republican Bill Lee ended up winning the governor's election, and our development district colleague was allowed to return to his old job almost immediately. And what happened next is now and will continue to be one of the most talked about periods in the history of Tennessee politics. And that is saying a lot, because Tennessee politics have been very colorful. But in the addition to an election of a Republican governor, it was also a landslide victory for Republicans in our General Assembly. The results were so overwhelming that the Republicans now had a supermajority in both the Senate and the House. They did not need to compromise with the Democrats at all in order to get legislation passed. They had enough votes to pass or defeat any bill simply based on their number of members. And of course, this translated also into committee and subcommittee appointments, being very clear that the Republicans were going to control the General Assembly from top to bottom. But still, there were a number of moderate Republicans that were willing to work with Democrats in the legislative process, just like Democrats had worked with Republicans when the Democrats dominated the legislature previously. That is, until a new Speaker of the House was elected. So it happened that the existing Speaker of the House in 2018 decided to run for governor also, and she resigned her seat in order to run. That left the Speaker's position open, and a representative from the Nashville area by the name of Glenn Casada campaigned hard for the position and was eventually elected by his colleagues to start serving in January of 2019. So his campaign was very heated, and it was clear from the start that he and his supporters were going to rule with a heavy hand. There were a number of really weird things that went on during his tenure, including bugging his own outer office to hear what people were talking about out there. He hired hall monitors to listen in on conversation between other legislators discussing issues in the halls of the legislature. And he also employed a young deputy that crashed and burned when some really lurid details came out about his personal life. So after a succession of embarrassing revelations in the press, the Republicans finally had enough and pressed for his resignation. And when it became clear they could not continue after a very public vote of no confidence in a caucus meeting, he resigned in August of 2019, having served for the shortest tenure in Tennessee history. So it's always fun to talk about how politics can go very wrong at the state level, but here's what I want to focus on in regard to nonpartisanship. And it's simply Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. You see, when Casada was running for election as a speaker, he had strong supporters, strong dissenters. The campaign was hotly contested, and when the outcome was not in doubt and he won, he rewarded his supporters, punished his dissenters. As it turned out, one of his strongest supporters was this representative from West Tennessee that had taken an active dislike to development districts during the gubernatorial campaign. And in order to reward this guy for his support, Casada named him as the chair of the House Budget Subcommittee, otherwise known as the Black Hole. Now, we've all had to deal with these kind of subcommittees. In Tennessee, all budget requests in the House must be submitted to Budget Sub for consideration, and if they don't have the support of the chair, then they disappear into the black hole. So in our state, each development district gets a minimum of $200,000 a year from the legislature. Pretty nice chunk of change. Some of them get even a little more based upon their local due structure. My district gets $200,000, very important in my budget, not just to pay recurring expenses, but also I use it as a match for federal and state funds. Previously, in years past, our budget requests have passed through committees and been approved every year like clockwork, but that did not happen in 2019. On the final day the final day of the legislative session, in the very last subcommittee meeting, out of the blue, without any prior notice, a budget amendment was presented and passed that cut $174,000 from our statewide appropriation for development districts. Our lobbyist was actually present in the subcommittee meeting, but was powerless to stop it. And to make matters worse, the cut was recurring, meaning that every year henceforth, the cut would be in effect. And since there are 9 development districts in the state, the cut worked out to be a little over $19,000 per district. Not a huge amount of money, but it was very concerning to us that a precedent was set. They could do it once, and they could do it again. Fortunately for us, when the speaker was forced to resign, all of his supporters were relegated to the backbench. No further damage was done in the 2020 legislative session. In fact, we were able to get the cut restored during a very difficult 2020 budget cycle. But during our lobbying efforts to get the cut restored, we learned that the political animosity towards development district was not just confined to the legislature. We had problems in the administration as well. A senior staff member, someone in the governor's inner circle, is also holding a grudge about the involvement in the gubernatorial campaign by a district director. And that problem persists, and we will certainly face challenges from this in the future. Currently, although we would be restored to our full appropriation, COVID-19 came into play, and our governor mandated a 12% across the board cut for appropriations due to the constrained budget environment, and consequently, the 9 development districts took a $25,000 hit this year, and hopefully this will be restored next year. So my takeaways from this experience are as follows. First, partisanship is a door that swings both ways. You might benefit when your folks are in power, but you will very likely be subject to sanctions when that changes, and it will change. And I can tell you, politicians do not forget slights, and they do hold grudges. Second, the sins of one organization will always apply to all similar organizations. If one development district is caught stealing, then it's assumed that all development districts are stealing. If one development district is political, it is assumed that all development districts are political. And then third, in the legislative process, it is difficult to pull one organization out for sanction individually. What will happen is the rest of the districts will get caught up in a blanket sanction that may be intended to punish just one district. I believe, though I may be incorrect, that the budget amendment that was passed to cut $174,000 from our appropriation was intended to apply to only one district, but was poorly written and therefore interpreted to apply to all the districts proportionally. And then fourth, and to me most importantly, a reputation for impartiality may take decades to develop and maintain for an organization, but only one election cycle to destroy. So, I have always maintained that nonpartisanship is a critical function of development districts. That's the way I work. That's the way I'll always work here. It has served me well. It's something I recommend for everybody. I realize that we all have individual political leanings, but believe me, this is just one example of how it can really come back to bite you if you get public about what your political affiliation is and publicly support one candidate or the other. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I hope I've passed along some words of wisdom, and Jim, I'll kick it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. That was very great and sobering. And I don't think we're going to let you retire. But thank you to Sabrina and Laurie and Chris and Terry for your perspectives. I think they were all really great. gives a lot of us a lot of things to think about. I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments that any of the rest of you have, would like to direct to any of the speakers or just in general.
Hi, this is Tom Lanahan, and I was just wondering, Terry, were there any ramifications for that director that took the leave of absence and worked on a campaign and then came back? What did his board think about all that?
Great question, and there's kind of a two-part answer. The board that he served, the area that he serves was a heavily Democratic area. So they were kind of leaning towards Carl Dean and his campaign to begin with. So they thought it was great that they might have somebody that might be in the inner circle of the Dean administration if he got elected. So, you know, it was very unusual, I think, that they granted him a leave of absence. You know, that seems very strange to me. Usually somebody leaves to go work in a campaign and there's not an opportunity to come back, but this gentleman somehow convinced his board to take a leave of absence. So so yeah, it worked well at the local level, but you know, our statewide association is more fellowship and informational in nature. We generally don't have strong bylaws. One of the criticisms, quite frankly, when we visited with the administration and kind of said, hey, look, this didn't have anything else and didn't have anything to do with us, they looked at it and said, well, why didn't you sanction this person? That, you know, and we didn't have a good answer for that. So, you know, I think probably there ought to be some mechanisms in some of these state organizations that would provide for sanctions against inappropriate behavior by one of the colleagues. I don't know how that works, but it certainly would have kind of smoothed over some of the criticisms that we faced. We just kind of sat there, couldn't do much, but you know, we don't really have any input into how an individual district or an individual executive committee conducts their business. So we really didn't have any power to do that, but I think it would be beneficial for state organizations to consider some kind of sanction, you know, imposition for somebody that's doing something that is contrary to the benefit of the statewide network. So that's something I wish would change in our state. I don't see that happening, but I would be for it if it ever came about.
Good question, Tom. Other questions?
Terry,
Comment?
I have one, Jim. This is Dwayne Pratt. Terry, how long had this executive director that took this job on the political campaign been serving in that role? Was he new or was he seasoned and should have known better? And one of the things that we do, or I know that we do here at my district, I think it's probably statewide, is our personnel policies prohibit any work for a partisan political campaign. So just FYI.
This particular director was very well, he was a former county mayor in the area that he served. He was a member of a previous administration in our State Department of Economic and Community Development. Very well respected person. Always had, you know, affiliations with the Democratic Party. That was who he, you know, who he affiliated with when he was an elected official. He'd been in their job probably 5 or 6 years, so he wasn't new by any stretch of the imagination. I think he saw an opportunity to really make a difference in the rural areas. The Carl Dean campaign was focused on metropolitan areas as you know, in terms of economic development, that's what they were talking about. And I think this person had great motivation in terms of, hey, look, the rural folks need a voice in this administration if, you know, if they're successful. So I think his intentions were good, but whenever you get involved publicly and advocate for one candidate or another, it's going to cause bad feelings, and you're going to pay for those if you don't win.
Yeah. Others?
Jim, this is Wayne. I had a question. All of us have elected officials serving on our boards, and our board member has to be an elected official. So how have people been successful at convincing them that, yes, you represent this community, but yet you're the head or you're the chair of a regional organization, and you got to put your regional hat on when you come to a board meeting and not really focus on what your community interests are? Tony?
This is Tom. I think that's an excellent question, because that's you know, that's certainly one of the challenges, especially where there's issues that you have, you know, some differences there, and are they there to advocate for their local community's position on that? And you know, I think a lot of my board members actually enjoy the opportunity to serve on the Regional Planning Council, because they don't have to, you know, worry or deal with the issues of, you know, why didn't Mrs. So-and-so's trash get picked up, or, you know, how do I approve the site plan for this thing that, you know, I got a contributor or I got a constituent or whatever. And so it's like presenting them with those opportunities to be a statesman, to kind of step out of the little parochial issues and really take on the big issues. And it's something that I share with them during the orientation that I do. You know, I talk about that, you know, they'll be looking at big issues, and this is, you know, a chance to have some legacy on those things. And you know, some of it is just you hope that the folks who sort of self-select themselves to be on the council recognize what it is and what it does, and what their role would be there.
Thank you, Tony.
Anybody else have a comment on that? Any other?
I was going to add one thing. This strategy has not worked in my current region, but in the Shenandoah Valley, excuse me, in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, I did find success in sort of flipping that situation on its end and communicating to the elected officials that served on our board that the regional commission could be used as a way to move initiatives forward that might not play well at the local level, but that they knew they needed to move forward. So our administrators and several of the elected officials, particularly those that had been around for a while, enjoyed participation in the regional commission because it gave them some political cover on some topics. Affordable housing was an example that, you know, they were able to go back home and say to their constituents, well, this was a regional decision, you know, we're part of a regional body. We don't always get what we want at that table, you know, that kind of thing. And that opportunity that we presented to the elected officials, I think helped to be able to think about things a little bit differently. I will say here in the Richmond region, we're going through a charter amendment process right now and actually working to try to transition our membership to a much smaller group of people. I have the whole board of supervisors for 2 of our largest counties on our board. So Wayne, I mean, they definitely come with their district hat on. They don't even come with their county hat on. They come with their district hat on. And so for the last 2 years, we've been working with the county administrators to prepare the runway, if you will, to streamline that so that we have fewer members on our board and they then become the delegate from the county to the regional commission table. And we're hoping that that'll kind of help with that situation, because it's very hard in our current region to get our commissioners to think out of their district, let alone out of their county or city.
Others? Well, I think this has really been a great discussion. Appreciate the speakers, Sabrina and Laurie and Chris and Terry. We had 56 people on today, and I think we had somebody from just about every state. So it was really great. Again, I want to thank Plan RVA and Martha for setting the Zoom up. We have 2 more sessions. You're probably tired of hearing from me about them and all the emails I send out. But anyway, we've got Friday morning at 9 o'clock and next Tuesday. This is kind of a continuation of the fly-in that we did several years ago in Atlanta on marketing and social media and all that with Erica Allison from Formations PR in Hendersonville, North Carolina, that I know a number of you use for work with your council and websites, etc. So I again want to thank everybody, and we look forward to hopefully seeing y'all again on Friday. Thanks.
Hey, Jim?
Yes.
That 9 o'clock is Central Time, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, 9 Central. You know, we got Rito and about 3 or 4 other people that have regions that are in both time zones. So I guess I guess in Chris's case, he has to send out all his notices of like we do, 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central. See y'all Friday.
All right. See you Friday.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. Bye-bye.